So, whenever you picture the great explorers who mapped the globe, there's usually this very distinct, almost like heavily sanitized image that comes to mind, right?
Yeah, the classic textbook image.
Exactly. You picture the European conqueror in the velvet doublet standing on the bow of a ship. He's got, a brass spyglass, a royal charter in his pocket.
Right, and he's backed by the immense, just untouchable wealth of an empire.
Yeah, exactly. But if you want to understand what it actually took to map the deep interior of the American West, you have to completely tear up that portrait.
You really do. Because it's an image of complete insulation.
Yeah.
The traditional conqueror arrives expecting the environment to just, bend to his will. He's armed with this preconceived hierarchy where he sits comfortably at the very top.
But take away the ship. Take away the armor, the royal decrees, the supply lines. Picture instead a man washing up on a freezing, storm-battered beach.
Yeah, completely naked.
Naked, starving to death.
Yeah.
And legally speaking, under the laws of the old world, he possesses absolutely zero rights. He is enslaved.
And yet, that specific man, stripped of absolutely everything, becomes the absolute linchpin of survival for his former masters.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. It forces us to completely flip the script on what survival actually required in this unmapped hemisphere.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today we are taking you across a brutal, unforgiving geography. We are tracing the 2,000-mile journey of a man named Estevanico.
Also often recorded as Esteban de Dorantes.
Right, and he was an enslaved Moroccan man who survived arguably the most disastrous expedition in the history of the Americas.
Without a doubt.
Okay, let's unpack this, because in doing so, he became the very first non-native from the Old World to cross the North American continent.
And this is decades before the first European settlement was even a blueprint. We are talking nearly 300 years before Lewis and Clark.
As the U.S. approaches its 250th anniversary, it's just crazy to look back at this. Out of a massive, heavily armed 600-person expedition that left Spain, only 4 men survived.
4 out of 600.
It's just 4. And the architecture of their survival rested almost entirely on Estevanico's ability to adapt to environments that, well, completely shattered Spanish imperial hubris.
Exactly. So if all that old world hierarchy is completely useless in this new environment, we have to look at what actually did matter.
Right.
And to understand that, we need to look at the unique psychological and cultural toolkit Estevanico brought with him. Because you don't just survive 2,000 miles of hostile territory by accident.
They definitely don't. So let's look at his background. Because he was born around the turn of the 16th century, right? Around 1500 or maybe 1513.
Yeah, the exact year is a bit fuzzy, but he was born in Azamora, which is this major port city on the Atlantic coast of Morocco.
And a port city means intersections. Trade, shifting powers, multiple languages.
Precisely. Azamor was actually a Portuguese-controlled town during his youth, but it was heavily populated by Arab and Berber communities.
So he's navigating a really fluid, multicultural environment right from the start.
He is. He was likely raised as a Muslim, but the timeline shifts violently for him in 1522. That's when he is sold into slavery to a Spanish nobleman named Andrés Dorantes.
Right, Dorantes de Carranza. And Spain had those strict laws forbidding non-Catholics from traveling to their territories in the Americas.
Exactly. So Estevanico was baptized Catholic.
Meaning he's already operating with layers of identity. I mean, he likely speaks Arabic, Tamazight, Portuguese, and Spanish.
And he understands the nuances of forced religious assimilation.
Which makes him essentially a human cipher. Someone uniquely wired to decode complex cultural intersections.
And he is going to need every ounce of that skill, because in June of 1527, he and Dorantes joined the Panfilo de Narvaez expedition.
Oh man, the Narvaez expedition. It is a masterclass in how not to explore a continent.
It really is. They set out with 5 ships and 600 men to colonize Spanish Florida. But before they even reach the mainland, the whole operation is just unraveling.
Right, don't they have a massive desertion problem?
Oh, huge. 140 men desert in Santo Domingo alone. And then violent hurricanes in Cuba sink 2 ships and drown 50 men before they even catch sight of their destination.
So it's basically doomed from the start. But the real catastrophe happens when they finally make landfall. This is April 15th, 1528, on the western coast of Florida.
Right around the Tampa Bay or Boca Ciega Bay area, yeah. Present-day St. Petersburg.
Because Narvaez, the commander, he looks at this completely alien, unmapped wilderness and makes a decision of just breathtaking arrogance.
He splits his forces.
Which is madness.
Total madness. He orders the ships to sail north along the coast to find a natural harbor, while he takes 300 men, including Estevanico, and marches 300 miles inland to meet them.
With zero topographical maps, zero understanding of the coastline, you're separating your infantry from your only lifeline.
And of course, they never see those ships again.
Never. It's like signing up for a luxury transatlantic cruise, but you end up in a brutal wilderness survival reality show, where the showrunners actively want you to fail.
That's a perfect way to put it. Now, I want you to picture the geography these 300 men are stepping into.
Okay.
These are soldiers accustomed to the dry, arid climates of the Iberian Peninsula and North Africa. Suddenly, they are thrust into the deep American South.
Right. We're talking about dense, suffocatingly humid, mosquito-infested swampland.
They're marching toward present-day Tallahassee.
I try to imagine walking through a Florida swamp in the dead of summer, but doing it in 16th century Spanish armor.
It wouldn't be armor. It would be a wearable oven.
Exactly.
It was a literal death trap. They are hacking their way through dense palmetto thickets, sinking into the muck, suffering from heat exhaustion and malaria. And they aren't alone.
No, they are marching straight into the territory of the Appalachian Native Americans, who were not exactly rolling out the red carpet for a heavily armed foreign battalion.
Absolutely not. The Appalachi were brilliant tacticians who understood their environment perfectly. They engaged in relentless guerrilla warfare.
The irony is just staggering. The men who thought they were conquering the land were completely conquered by the swamps and the arrows of the Appalachia.
Yeah, Spanish accounts later described Appalachia archers firing arrows with such force that they could pierce right through the joints of Spanish plate armor.
Wow.
So you have a highly rigid, hierarchical European military structure completely disintegrating in the mud.
The environment literally strips them of their imperial identity.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this geographical defeat completely stripped the Spanish of their imperial power.
Because titles and rank mean absolutely nothing when you're starving in a swamp.
Exactly. The desperation gets so profound that to survive the march north toward the Florida Panhandle, these supposed conquerors have to systematically slaughter and eat their last 42 horses.
Which, the horse was the ultimate symbol of Spanish military superiority. Eating them is the absolute admission of defeat.
It's the end of the line for them as an army. By the time they reach the coast of the Panhandle, their numbers are dwindling fast, they are trapped, and they realize they just can't fight the land anymore.
So driven to the edge of the continent by this hostile terrain, their only choice is the sea.
Right. They have to shift their battle from the swamps to the unforgiving ocean.
But they don't have ships, so they have to transition from a defeated army into a desperate band of shipwrights.
It is a macabre assembly line, honestly. This is around September 1528. They melt down their crossbows, their stirrups, their armor to forge crude nails.
They actually stitch the hides of the horses they just ate to create water bladders.
Yeah. And they use their own tattered clothing for sails. They build 5 incredibly fragile, overcrowded makeshift rafts out of tree trunks.
And push out into the Gulf of Mexico, just hoping to hug the coastline all the way down to a Spanish settlement in Mexico.
Which means they are trading the slow suffocation of the swamp for the chaotic violence of the open ocean.
Just out of the frying pan and into the fire.
Yeah.
Though, as they drift westward, they actually become the first non-native people to observe the mouth of the massive Mississippi River.
They do, but the Gulf Coast geography is relentless. The shallow waters and sudden atmospheric shifts create notorious violent storm systems.
And those fierce storms and a hurricane catch them. The rafts capsize near Galveston Island, Texas.
And Narvaez dies. He's swept out to sea.
So out of the original 600, only about 80 men wash ashore on these barrier islands, naked and starving.
And the geographic whiplash here is insane. They just spend months boiling alive in the Florida humidity, and now they're thrown onto these cold, completely exposed barrier islands.
Right as winter sets in. Winter of 1528 to 1529.
Yeah, the Texas coast in winter can be brutally cold, with freezing winds whipping off the water. The isolation of these islands basically trapped them.
They have no shelter, no clothing, no food. Disease and starvation wipe out almost everyone. By the end of it, only 4 remain.
Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca, Alonso del Castillo Maldonado, Andrés Dorantes, and Estevanico.
And their situation immediately worsens, because they are quickly found and enslaved by the local Karankawa and Coahuiltecan tribes.
They are trapped there for 5 brutal years.
This is where I really want to ask a pointed question, though. Because these 4 men are plunged into forced labor, right? digging roots in freezing coastal mud, hauling wood.
Completely at the mercy of their
No.
captors.
Right. So how does a person like Estevanico, who was already enslaved back in Europe, become the indispensable linchpin of survival for his former masters?
It all comes back to Estevanico's unique adaptability. Like we said, coming from Azamor, he already likely spoke Tamazight, Arabic, Portuguese, and Spanish.
He's actively decoding the environment.
Exactly. In Texas, while the three Spanish noblemen are likely clinging stubbornly to their old world identities, struggling with their fallen status, Estevanico is observing.
He's listening.
Yes, he quickly masters the local spoken dialects, but more importantly, he learns the regional sign language.
The Plains Sign Language, which was a universal tool used by dozens of different tribes across the vast American interior to facilitate trade.
Right, and by mastering that, he suddenly possessed the most valuable currency in this new geography.
Information and communication.
Exactly. He holds the monopoly on communication. He becomes the sole bridge between the captive survivors and the entire indigenous world.
That is such a profound shift in power dynamics. He transforms himself into the linguistic key that unlocks their only way out.
And he uses that key. Estevanico uses his linguistic skills to coordinate an escape in 1534.
They transition from being enslaved castaways to nomadic cross-continental wanderers.
And this initiates the most geographically expansive phase of their journey. They set out on foot to walk roughly 2,000 miles across the deep American interior.
2,000 miles through present-day Texas, the Southwest, and northern Mexico.
Which means the landscape is demanding immense endurance yet again. They leave the freezing coastal wetlands and walk straight into the vast, arid expanses of the Sonoran Desert.
The Sonoran Desert is an incredibly punishing biome. You have baking, extreme heat during the day that causes heat stroke.
Followed by plummeting, freezing temperatures the moment the sun goes down.
And water sources are incredibly scarce. You can't just walk into a desert like that and hope for the best. You are relying entirely on the hospitality of native villages scattered across the desert.
But you can't just knock on a village door and ask for a handout. To secure safe passage and provisions, they essentially reinvent themselves.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because they present themselves to the desert tribes as medicine men or sons of the sun.
Yes, sons of the sun.
But I want to push back on this narrative a bit. Were they cynically exploiting native beliefs just to survive and get food? Or was this a genuine cultural exchange?
It's a fascinating psychological synthesis, honestly. It wasn't just a cheap magic trick. Estevanico was deeply observant of the indigenous healing rituals he witnessed.
Right. How does a North African Muslim, baptized as a Spanish Catholic, construct a Native American religious persona?
Well, he blended Spanish Christian rituals with native practices he had observed to cure people. He began carrying a specific gourd rattle, which was a deeply recognized instrument used by local medicine men.
And he wore seashell bracelets and ankle bells, right?
Yes, and they would mix in their own backgrounds, too. They'd perform the Catholic sign of the cross, breathe on the afflicted, which was common in European folk medicine.
And whether it was the placebo effect or just the natural course of illness, their treatments appeared to work, especially after they supposedly cured a woman who was very sick.
Their reputation exploded across the desert. Estevanico essentially became the ultimate advance scout. He traveled days ahead of the Spaniards, adorned with his bracelets, bells, and gourd rattle.
He's taking on the immense psychological burden of walking into completely unknown, heavily populated territories to announce their arrival.
And he earned such immense respect that up to 3,000 indigenous people would follow them between villages.
It's an unbelievable image. A massive, rolling, nomadic city moving across the baking Sonoran Desert, guided by an enslaved Moroccan man.
And they do this until July 1536, when they finally encounter Spanish slave raiders near Culiacan in modern-day Sinaloa.
You can only imagine the absolute cognitive dissonance for those Spanish cavalrymen.
Oh, operating on the very edge of the known empire, and suddenly, out of the north walks 3 ragged Spaniards and a Moroccan man, commanding an entourage of thousands of Native Americans.
The culture shock is real. The survivors are then taken 1,000 miles south to Mexico City.
The bustling capital of New Spain.
And you would think, after surviving the Florida swamps, the Texas winter, years of slavery, and a 2,000-mile desert trek, that's it. Triumphant arrival, you're done.
Cabeza de Vaca actually did return to Spain and wrote his famous account.
Right. But the survivors' arrival in Mexico City isn't the end. because the tales they heard in the desert spark a gold rush mentality.
While in the desert, they had heard native rumors of wealthy, gilded cities to the north.
Which, let's be real, was probably a brilliant native strategy to encourage these resource-heavy wanderers to keep moving along to the next territory.
Almost certainly. But the Spanish officials in Mexico City don't hear a polite dismissal. They hear the echoes of the Aztec and Inca conquests.
The viceroy of New Spain, Antonio de Mendoza, becomes obsessed. He wants to find the 7 cities of Cibola.
And the Spanish survivors flat out refuse to go back. They know how brutal that geography is. So Mendoza purchases Estevanico.
Some records suggest he possibly emancipated him to put him on the payroll, right?
Yes, his exact legal status at this point is debated. But regardless, Estevanico is ordered to guide Fray Marcos de Niza back north.
So it sends Estevanico right back into the unknown. March 7, 1539, the expedition leaves Culiacan.
And Estevanico scouts ahead again, back in his element.
He reverts to his desert playbook. Feathers, bells, sacred gourd rattle.
Now, to manage the vast distances, Fray Marcos gave him a specific communication protocol. If Estevanico heard of a minor discovery, he was to send messengers back with a small cross. If it was a major discovery, a larger cross.
Right. Which sets up one of the most fateful moments in North American history. By spring 1539, Estevanico reaches the Tierra Nueva, the new land.
Specifically, he reaches the Zuni pueblo of Hawiku in modern New Mexico and Arizona.
And he sends back a massive cross. The messengers tell the friar it's the height of a man. He is signaling a massive discovery.
He believes he found Cibola. But this is where the unique geography and architecture of the Southwest plays a cruel trick on the Spanish imagination.
The Zuni lived in massive, multi-story apartment complexes built entirely of adobe mud.
And from afar, particularly in the glaring light on the desert sunset, that baked mud catches the light. It created a geographic illusion where the walls looked as if they were gleaming with solid gold.
But there was no gold. It was an advanced agricultural society with mud and a few turquoise stones. Yet that geographic illusion of wealth changed history.
Because shortly after entering Hawiku, Estevanico is killed by the Zuni.
So what does this all mean? Why was Estevanico killed after successfully navigating native relations for years?
What's fascinating here is how conflicting the accounts of his death are.
Right, because the Zunis were an established, fortified civilization with complex socio-political structures. You don't just waltz in demanding things.
Exactly. Now, later Spanish accounts claimed he was killed because he was arrogant, demanded turquoise in women, and was seen as a bad man.
But there are deeper cultural mechanics at play, too.
Yes. For instance, the specific gourd rattle Estevanico carried, the one from Texas, may have been adorned with owl feathers, and to the Zuni, owl feathers were sometimes associated with death or hostile tribes.
So he might have inadvertently signaled that he was a threat or an enemy spy.
Precisely. Or they may have recognized he was a foreigner and viewed him as an imposter. Impersonating a medicine man unconvincingly in a highly structured religious society was a severe offense.
I mean, there's even a theory that he faked his own death, right? To finally win his freedom and live among the Zuni.
It's a compelling theory. But regardless of how he died, his death triggered the massive 1540 Coronado expedition.
Heavily armed Spanish forces flood into the region, forever altering the American Southwest.
And that is why it is so staggering to look at the sheer magnitude of Estevanico's geographic achievements.
Yeah, let's just summarize this for you. From the Moroccan coast to the deadly swamps of Florida, to the stormy Texas barrier islands, to the sweeping Sonoran desert, he walked thousands of miles.
He effectively mapped the American West for the rest of the world.
But this raises an important question, doesn't it? Estevanico left no written records.
He didn't, which is why he is a historical footnote in American textbooks compared to figures like Lewis and Clark.
He's completely overshadowed.
But I want to leave you with a different kind of historical memory. There is a powerful element within Native American folklore in the Southwest, specifically among the Pueblo peoples known as the Chacuayna Kachina.
A Kachina is a highly revered spirit being in their traditions, right?
Yes. And the Chacuayna is specifically a black ogre spirit. Many cultural historians theorize that this specific figure was created as a direct psychological reflection of the Pueblo's first encounter with a man of African descent.
With Estevanico.
Yeah.
It became an embodiment of the profound fear of European conquest.
Exactly. I want you to ponder that. Even if traditional history books forgot the enslaved explorer who opened the American West, did the indigenous people who actually met him build a permanent monument to him in their spiritual traditions?
Wow. He literally became mythologized into their permanent traditions. It's just an unforgettable image.
It really
So
is.
the next time you look at a map of North America, just mentally erase the highways,
Yeah.
erase the borders.
Leave just the raw, brutal geography.
Yeah, and instead of a conquistador planting a flag, picture a polyglot Moroccan man stripped of everything, shaking a gourd rattle, walking thousands of miles into the void, and speaking his way into history.